Hello, once again, Jay with Great Scott Audio Productions, reading for Book Bites and Bitten by Books. This time, are going to do a bit from Anton Strout's Dead to Me, the Simon Canderas novels. Absolutely so much fun to read. A lot of great pop culture references, really good snarky humor, and a lot of fun. We're going to go ahead and start with chapter 2, read a little bit of that, and we hope you enjoy. I was so shaken from such an intense psychometric reading that I hurried to the kitchen and grabbed my keys from the counter. I ran back up my hall to the door next to the bathroom, unlocking its 3 locks. I flicked on the light and was instantly blinded by the absence of color. Every last object in the room was exactly the same shade of white. There was an unused desk, 2 empty bookshelves, a block of large square storage cubes. A single cushioned chair, also white, sat alone in the center of the room. The white room was my inner sanctum, a room I had put together to be as psychically neutral a place as possible. I needed a place that was clean of any potential triggers to my power, since everything else in my apartment was potentially chock full of other people's pasts. I came there whenever I needed to calm myself after a particularly bad psychometric incident. And tonight's Mardi Gras Slam Fest definitely made that list. I sat down in the chair before I collapsed. When my panic finally settled down after several minutes, I realized that sitting here doing nothing wasn't the solution. I just had to get out of my apartment for now. I got up from the chair, turned off the light, and relocked the 3 locks on the door. On the way out of the apartment, I chugged a glass of OJ to fight the hypoglycemic after effect of using my power. I slipped my black gloves on, heading for the elevator. I rarely went anywhere without my gloves these days. They were old and worn, and the one thing that muffled my powers. It just made life easier to wear them. But second skin or not, they always made me feel a bit like the Bubble Boy. As I walked from my digs in Soho up toward Union Square, I stopped at my trusty coffee guy and caught word that some real vintage Antiques Roadshow action had happened under the West Side Highway at 79th Street. I jumped straight into a cab. When the taxi approached the turnoff, the driver spooked out on me, refusing to take his cab any further west. After a minute of pointless arguing, I got out and slammed the door. Prick. Did he think antiquarians really posed such a threat to society that he couldn't take me a few streets closer? I walked the last few blocks west toward the address my coffee guy had given me. Makeshift lights flooded an impromptu night market that had taken root directly beneath an underpass of the West Side Highway, its tables and booths looking hastily thrown up and capable of disappearing in a flash if need be. The first time I had heard of these quirky shopping markets was through a friend of mine who had visited Taiwan. They were all life forms on their own, and he told me, spur-of-the-moment shantytowns that sprang up and broke down in a single night, only to reappear like a magician's assistant in a completely different location at the next. Last year, I noticed that the phenomena had quietly made its way stateside, mutating into a scattering of caravan flea markets that popped up occasionally throughout Manhattan. I looked forward to the times when I was lucky enough to come across them. It was only a few years since I'd given up life of thievery and running with a criminal crowd. That meant that these days I was always on the lookout for my next big legitimate score, because the only true luxury I had established for myself was my apartment. Keeping up with my outrageous Soho maintenance fees was hard, but now that I worked for the Department of Extraordinary Affairs, I was determined to do it somewhat honestly. I worked hard to put my unscrupulous use of my powers behind me. Long before finding the DEA, I had been an impressionable, confused kid with burgeoning powers, working part-time for any antique shop that would have me. Cutthroats swarmed that business like sharks being chummed, and there were plenty of sketchy opportunists more than willing to drag me into the world of big scores, petty cons, and fast money. I started stealing from the legitimate stores I worked for, lying to them as I found hidden treasures I psychometrically discovered were worth a lot. All my less than honest role models just thought I had a knack for it, never guessing that I had some strange power, and I was happy to keep them thinking that. By the time I turned 20, we were going for the big cash scores, priceless pieces of artwork, but we were sloppy and, worse, greedy. After one too many close calls and the constant betrayal and backstabbing that you encounter with bottom-feeding miscreants, I was lucky enough to barely escape a stint in jail. The others weren't so lucky. I took the whole misadventure as a serious wake-up call to get my act together, and disappeared off their radar. My life of crime had started gradually, but it ended the second fear pushed me to see who I'd really become. I wasn't a clever kid using his powers to pull the wool over a couple of too rich dealers anymore. I was a thief, a criminal. I was a bottom feeder too. I sold off the last of my stolen goods to finance a new apartment and to start fresh. I sold off the last of my stolen goods to finance a new apartment and start fresh. After all, I knew it would be easier to turn over a new leaf in style. At these midnight markets, I still found it impossible to resist going for a score. That feeling of finding something only I could tell was valuable. The call of life's secret treasures waiting to be reclaimed was too great, and as long as I was paying for the goods, it was all on the up and up. These markets fueled a deeper need in me, an emotional one that appealed to the same part of my secret heart that loved design on a dime TV shows. I was excited as a club kid finding out about a late-night rave. Plus, if I could discover the right hidden treasure, it meant I could finally be able to fill my fridge with something more edible than its current contents of baking soda, packets of mustard sauce, and month-old chicken marinara that was on the verge of growing its own legs and leaving on its own accord. For 4 a.m., the aisles were crowded with an interesting assortment of people. Eurotrash, insomniacs, and a few better-dressed New Yorkers like me. I recognized a few familiar faces working behind the tables at their crude little stands. Over the years, I'd grown to know some of these wandering salesmen well. Some I might count as friends, but even those I knew best were probably mostly after my greenbacks. All of them, though, had told me how much they admired my impeccable taste. Little did they know. Thank you again, and have a good day.